A newly released study details the extent to which China is profiting off forced labor of repressed ethnic minorities. One America's Hans Hubbard reports.
The People's Republic of China continues to deny any wrongdoing regarding its treatment of ethnic minorities, flying in the face of mounting evidence of the regime's abuses. The latest data on human rights transgressions in the country's Xinjiang province came in the form of a Tuesday report prepared by the Washington-based Center for Global Policy, revealing that more than 500,000 ethnic Uyghurs have been pushed into forced labor picking cotton. Xinjiang produces about 20% of the world's cotton supply, and a large portion of the workforce in the province's fields is supplied to the PRC's controversial labor transfer programs, which forcibly relocate workers from mostly minority backgrounds. These programs are publicly recognized and even touted by the Chinese Communist Party, which maintains people from ethnic and religious minorities voluntarily enter into these arrangements.
按照劳动法
Chinese citizens sign voluntary contracts with their employers on the basis of equality and consensus and get due payment. There is no forced labor alleged by some with ulterior motives. Helping people of all ethnic groups secure stable employment is entirely different from forced labor.
Numerous studies refute this, however, detailing poor living conditions, involuntary servitude, and coercive re-education campaigns meant to erase Uyghur traditions, religion, and cultural practices in order to indoctrinate them into the PRC's communist ideology. Independent researcher Adrian Zenz, who authored the Center for Global Policy study, has also raised the alarm on China's imposition of measures aimed at reducing the Uyghur population, to the point of implanting birth control devices in Uyghur women against their will and forcing them to undergo abortions, which Zenz adds fits the legal definition of genocide.
So initially, academics like myself talked about cultural genocide. But when I finished writing up my report, I came to the conclusion that my findings clearly tick one of the definitions of the United Nations Convention for the Prevention of Literal Genocide, namely the suppression of births. It's a literal genocide criterion of the United Nations. So we're now talking a new dimension. So now we are saying, okay, the United Nations, national governments, they actually have constitutional obligations to prevent genocide. Now, they need to launch investigations into determining what is going on, and this has to be followed by sanctions.
Earlier this year, the Trump administration imposed sanctions against cotton exports originating from crops maintained by the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, a paramilitary organization responsible for a third of the province's cotton output. The Center for Global Policy, however, urges the extension of these sanctions to the entire region, arguing forced labor is a generalized practice and not confined to fields controlled by the XPCC. Despite this mounting evidence, on Monday, the International Court of Justice refused to pursue action against the Chinese Communist Party, arguing the matter lay outside its jurisdiction. In the face of international inaction, the U.S. Department of State has ramped up its campaign to raise awareness of the Chinese regime's mistreatment of ethnic and religious minorities. During an October speech in Indonesia, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called China the single greatest threat to religious freedom in the world and urged all who remain committed to the principles of democracy and personal liberty not to be taken in by the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to hide the extent of its campaign against universal, inalienable rights.
The atheist Chinese Communist Party has tried to convince the world that its brutalization of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang is necessary as a part of its counterterrorism efforts or poverty alleviation, depending on which audience that they are speaking to. There's no poverty alleviation justification for forced sterilizations or taking children away from their parents to be re-educated in state-run boarding schools. I just ask you to do this. Search your hearts. Look at the facts. Listen to the tales of the survivors and of their families.
Hans Hubbard, One American News.
Want to see more videos like this? Visit OANN.com for immediate access to all the clips you've been waiting to see.